Good afternoon, Mr. Yi and my fellow friends. I am Yong. Next slide. My group consists of me, Kai, Kahui, and Weihan. We are from Group 3. Next slide. I will be presenting what is migrant. Migrant is a person who moves from one place to another, especially in order to find work or better living conditions. Migrations can be legal or illegal. Migrants can be internal. For example, people from Alostar come to Penang is called migrant. Next slide. I'm going to talk about trends of migration. Labor migration has steadily increased over the past decades. Yet, not all migration is international, and some of the biggest challenges come from domestic migrant workers moving from the countryside to city. Besides war, will cause migrants to occur. For example, Syria. Why do people migrate? It is because they want to live a better life. For the rich country have higher migration rates and historical trends are what we are looking back at migrants today. For example, Australia received few waves of migration in 1850s from Europe to avoid World War II. Thousands 900s labor from China. 1970s Vietnamese boat people eventually become immigrants. Eventually they become migrants. Now Europe unions, the poor people go to rich place to work. For example, when Greeks go to Germany to work because they can earn more money. Currently, international migrants comprise 2.5% of the global population compared to 2.8% in the year 2000. In 2019, regionally, Europe hosts the largest number of international migrants, 82 million, followed by Northern America, 59 million, and Northern Africa and Western Asia, 49 million. The main reason for migration is that the economy can make more money and lead a better life. Next slide. As of 2004, roughly 1 in every 35 people is an international migrant. If they all live in the same place, it would be the world's 50 largest country. In 1990, there were an estimated 120 million international migrants. By 2000, there were an estimated 150 to 180 million. Next slide. Next is the acceptance of migrants. Migrants usually come from poor countries to rich countries. They are not always welcome. For example, Trump builds a wall to stop Mexican migrants. Trump is closing national borders to work, which is one of the key motivations behind international migration. For example, Malaysians to Singapore. From 1980 to 2020, most motives are for economies. In early years, some moved to another country because of war. Next, I will be passed to next presenter.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Lowe Han, and I would like to talk about the advantages of labor migration. For the advantages of labor migration, the first factor is remittances. In order to satisfy internal demand, the growth of products and services has therefore become a factor of growth. It helps the country increase the flow of revenue and increase the country's economic income and foreign currency balances, thereby allowing the country to purchase more imported products and providing a large number of loans to help the country grow. The exchange rates and interest rates would offer more consumer and investment credit to help reduce the capital costs. the long-term improvement in the standard of living of the country's population and indirect families. The money transfers made through the banking system, personal information from immigration could bring a major impact to the country. Based on the table above, we can see that India has the largest source of remittances that reached to the highest in 2020, where there were 83.13 billion US dollar, and comes to the second is China, which is 68.4 billion US dollar. Remittance flow are responsible for reducing rural poverty. Also, external economy migration, which with its complex characteristics, contributes in a broad sense to the eradication of poverty according to the concept of promoted human poverty. At the same time, jobs were created and internal consumption was stimulated. Remittances in all countries are a potential source of saving and investment for capital formation and development. The remittances have a particular impact on the development of their countries of origin as they are the most stable source of currency. The second factor of advantages is reduce the unemployment rate through migration. The European employment strategy aims to create more and better employment opportunities across the European Union, in line with the objectives of the European 2020 strategy. It approximately 75% of people are active in the labor market in the age between 20 and 64 years old. Among the population aged 30 to 34, the dropout rate is reduced to less than 10%, and the proportion of graduates in higher education is increased to at least 40%. The reduced number of people suffering from poverty and social exclusion by at least 20 million. The aim of the Europe 2020 strategy is to target job opportunities in society and reduce poverty. The benefits of migrant workers is that they could find an employment with expertise and qualification can be paid more than in their own countries to maintain as a better standard of living. As we can see in the table, Romania's unemployment rate reached 5.3% in 2017, the lowest over the last decade. The factor contributing to a decline in unemployment rate are the rise in the number of new workers and the external immigration of Romanians. According to the International Organization for Migration, workers can freely choose both their residence and their occupations by means of the free movement of persons. If a person is looking for a job in his country of origin and finds something that meets his standard, he can move and live in the country where he has received a favorable offer. This experience means an improvement in the flexibility of the workforce and will ease the employment of the migrant worker, thus leading to the reduction of unemployment in the country of origin. Another positive aspect of migration is interaction with society and culture. It could acquire new experience, expertise, has a positive impact on individual growth. So for the last factor is build up a talent pool. As the table shows that the immigrants of Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries have almost 45% of high-skilled Asian immigrants have completed their tertiary education, and only 24% are considered as poorly educated, that compared to 34% of the global average. It allows the developed countries like North America and Europe to obtain high-skilled immigrants from Asia with high education level. As Asia is the main source of international students in all OECD countries, besides North America and Europe, some Asia countries also receive labor source within Asia itself. In Asian countries have been working toward a free flow of skilled labor with the Asian qualification frameworks and facilitation of temporary visa issuance. Nowadays, countries around the world are using labor migration to build core competencies and qualifications, along with strengthening research capabilities. Now I will pass to the next presenter.
Good afternoon, Mr. Yi and friends. I'm Kai. I'll now present about the negative impacts of labor migration. This table refers to the perceptions of farmers regarding labor migration in Punjab, which is a state in India. The explanation of this table will be explained and shown in the next slide. Next slide. Regarding supply of labor, there are 85.7% of farmers revealed that due to the migration of laborers, there was increase in supply of labor for agricultural purposes, while 14.3% opined no change in the supply of labor. Regarding wage rates, 80% farmers reported a decline in the wage rate due to migrant of laborers, while 20% opined no change in the wage rate, which is shown in the previous table. Next, regarding the ill effects of labor migration, which was mainly from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh in the study sample, increase in social tension was reported by 45.7% farmers. Increase in crime was reported by 42.9% of farmers, and 37.1% each complained about cultural invasion and drug menace. The increase in intake of gutkas, pan masalas, which are chewing tobacco, and so forth, were also reported. Next slide. Besides, among the negative effects of migration for countries of origin is the fact that a significant part of the highly skilled workforce is lost. By emigrating qualified staff, the home state can no longer benefit from the results of investing in the training and qualification of human resources, the cost of which is an expense that it no longer recovers. Most of the time, migrant workers carry out activities that are inconsistent with graduate studies, with the qualifications and skills acquired. In this case, they make compromises by accepting jobs that are clearly inferior to their professional training. The result of this is that there is no longer professional continuity, disappearing some of the skills needed to practice the profession when it returns to the country. So it is noticed the negative impact of this discontinuation of specialized activity. Furthermore, in the absence of bilateral agreements on social security, a migrant worker from non-European countries such as Iceland, Norway, and Switzerland may be in a state of disquiet not to benefit from social security benefits and unable to make use of the length of service acquired abroad. The reasons are the effects of the departure of specialists to work abroad are felt for the country of home towards the decrease of the technological development, the reduction of the incomes, and the rate of employment in the labor market. Next slide. Moreover, labor migration is fueled by combined effects of push and pull factors, while the cost and risk associated with migration act as a constraint. Put simply, labor migration will take place when the combined effects of push and pull factors exceed the cost and risk, while push factors are likely to predominate in cases of distress and forced migration. Pull factors play a greater role in the case of migration of people who are relatively more affluent and originate from more developed countries. Although push and pull factors are closely intertwined and often difficult to separate, pull factors differ from push factors in that they are based on the expectations rather than on actual experience. Next slide. Migration is therefore invariably associated not only with cost but with risk too. The magnitude of these factors can vary greatly but tends to be higher for people who are poor and have a weak position on the labor market. The costs include those of a pecuniary as well as social and psychological nature. Risks may range from failure to obtain the expected employment, income and living standard at the destination, to the risk of expulsion, gross exploitation, or even outright slavery in cases of irregular migration. Next slide. Based on this figure, there are many refugees and asylum seekers disguise themselves as migrant workers. Therefore, this is considered as an illegal migration. During the period from 1990 to 2017, Northern Africa and Western Asia experienced the largest increase in the refugee stock, adding more than 9 billion refugees and asylum seekers. By contrast, over the same period, the number of refugees and asylum seekers decreased by more than 3 million in Central and Southern Asia. The refugee stock of 2017 accounted for 10.6% of the global international migrant stock of 2017. However, this share varied significantly across development groups, income groups, and regions. While refugees and asylum seekers accounted for only 3.2% of the international migrant stock in more developed regions, they comprise of 20% of all migrants in less developed regions. In low-income countries, refugees and asylum seekers constituted of 41.9% of the international migrant stock, compared to 22.5% in middle-income countries, as well as 2.7% in high-income countries. In Northern Africa and Western Asia, and in Sub-Saharan Africa, refugees and asylum seekers accounted for more than a quarter of all international migrants. By contrast, less than 5% of international migrants were refugees and asylum seekers in Oceania, Northern America, Eastern and Southeastern Asia, and Europe. That's all from my part. Thank you. I'll now pass it on to my next team member, Cao Hui, to present about the conclusion for labor migration. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir and friends. I'm Cao Hui, and I will now conclude the economic benefits of labor migration as a result of globalization. In the future, migration will be widely accepted as an essential adaptation strategy to climate change rather than a failure to adapt. Immobility can increase the vulnerability to environmental pressures, whereas migration seems to contribute positively to the capacity of those left behind to adapt to climate change. And it most often leads to net gains in wealth in receiving areas. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, IFRC, has endorsed migration as one strategy for adaptation as climate-related hazards and disasters influence mobility patterns. Evidently, migration should be included as an adaptation mechanism in national and regional strategies. Migration has been, for many years, an adaptive response to climate change. Building resilient communities of origin may reduce the impact of environmental change, but it is, however, unlikely to prevent migration. Therefore, it is better to accommodate migration and maximize its benefits rather than attempt to limit it. Migration is therefore a phenomenon in the true sense of the word. It is an observable occurrence and has been one throughout human history. It will remain with us, and our ability to understand that and work with it has become a significant feature of the work program of all humanitarian organizations, including the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. Next slide. Now I'll present the data of migration. As we can see from the figure on the right, in 2019, the number of international migrants worldwide, people residing in a country other than their country of birth, reached 272 million from 258 million in 2017. Female migrants constituted 48% of this international migrant stock. There are an estimated of 38 million migrant children. 3 out of 4 international migrants are of working age, meaning between 20 and 64 years old. 164 million are migrant workers. Approximately 31% of the international migrants worldwide reside in Asia, 30% in Europe, 26% in the Americas, 10% in Africa, and 3% in Oceania. Next slide. Large-scale movements of refugees and migrants affect all United Nations member states, and they require closer cooperation and responsibility sharing. In 2016, the United Nations General Assembly convened a high-level plenary meeting on addressing large movements of refugees and migrants. The United Nations Secretary-General prepared the report in Safety and Dignity, addressing that large movements of refugees and migrants with recommendations on the issue. United Nations member states adopted a set of commitments known as the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants, in which they recognize the need for a comprehensive approach to migration. The New York Declaration acknowledges the positive contribution of migrants to sustainable and inclusive development, and commits to protecting the safety, dignity, and human rights, as well as fundamental freedoms of all migrants, regardless of their migratory status. As a result of the New York Declaration, United Nations member states agree to work together to develop the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, adopted at an Intergovernmental Conference on International Migration in December 2018 in Morocco. The Global Compact for Migration, GCM, covers diverse issues such as strengthening labor rights for migrant workers, improving migration data as a basis for evidence-based policies, saving lives, and establishing international efforts on missing migrants, and many others. The implementation of the GCM will represent progress in governing migration in a way that increases its benefits for individuals, communities, and countries, and reduces its risk for all. With this, I would like to end our group presentation. That's all from our group. Thank you. Next slide. Next slide. These are our references. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you.